So we have a follow-up on this theme of the shifting currents internationally and the shifting geopolitical situation. As you know, Lynn, the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu was in Washington this week following his speech at the United Nations, and he is desperately attempting to sabotage the potentials for progress being made with the P5+1 talks over the diplomacy with Iran. However, it's clear that the Middle East war faction is in a weakening position due to the intervention largely that Russia made to force a peaceful resolution of the Syrian chemical weapons affair, along with the central role that Russia is now playing with regards to war avoidance with Iran in particular. Now, as you stated earlier today, Russia's actions have not only been crucial in transforming the strategic geometry of the area of the greater Southwest Asian region, but Russia's economic reorientation towards the east and towards Southwest Asia represent a significant factor in geopolitics at the present time. We know that recently Putin signed several agreements with the president of Vietnam to develop nuclear power plants in that country. This past Wednesday, Sergei Kirilenko attended the groundbreaking ceremony for the first nuclear power plant being built in Bangladesh. Russia is underwriting 90% of the cost of this project and has agreed to train the workers to run the nuclear power plant. And incidentally, also today, Russia announced the launching of a feasibility study to develop a manned base on the moon. So if you take the recent actions which Russia has taken, together with the announcement at the SCO meeting of the new Chinese president to go ahead with the Eurasian land bridge idea by name, it becomes very clear that the world is in the midst of an epic geopolitical realignment. Can you comment on this global perspective?
We have to think differently than we have before on this planet. Because what's happened to us with the death of Franklin Roosevelt and the advent of Truman, the United States, which had the promise of becoming the great nation that it had been promised to be before, but the death of him, the death of allowed a bum to become the president of the United States, and a bum who was completely controlled by Churchill and the British interests. We never really recovered. We have one recovery, and he was assassinated. And since the assassination of him, we have always been on the road down. Now that was the purpose of this whole thing. What had happened is Churchill had called for President to join in defending Europe against Hitler. And that had worked. Actually, Truman got the better of it in the end because he was a stooge of the British. Then we had a fight, and we had another president who was capable, and he did well, and then he was assassinated. And since that assassination, the United States has been sliding downward in net course all the way through. Look what happened immediately after the killing of our president. What happened is we took a bunch of American citizens into a war which there was no good reason to go into. As Douglas MacArthur, who died in that period right after that, and we never really regained. We had programs in place which had been set into motion, but these programs were dwarfed by what was happening and the changes in the government. There were people in government who tried to get it back. But the Bush family, for example, was one of the people from the inside who was always working for the British, destroying the chances of the United States to recover. Once that death had occurred, the United States never had any net progress, real progress. So what we're at now, we're in a situation where we now have to have progress, and we can. But the impediments are such things as this particular present president and some of the Republicans and others. The American people have lost a sense of their own confidence in their ability to do things which years earlier or decades earlier they would have understood could be done. What the problem that we face, me for example, is that we know what to do. We know what will work. But can we induce our fellow citizens to accept what can work? This has been all the way along. We've always had these opportunities, great opportunities. Take thermonuclear fusion. Since the 1970s, thermonuclear fusion has been a feasible project. And what it means a gigantic leaps for mankind. It means that mankind will be able to manage itself within the solar system when you get into those types of technology. Thermonuclear fusion has that implication. We're not going to put people on Mars, but we're going to put things on Mars which we will control with the aid of Earth. And these things will give us the means to defend ourselves against big rocks, which if they hit the Earth, will wipe out the human population of the Earth. So we will have these kinds of capabilities. Once we have that, and we have the world in the hands of governments. Now, we have a new way. The other aspect of this is, without thermonuclear fusion, you cannot defend the planet Earth and its population from a large asteroid. One blow from a big asteroid, which is lurking nearby in the environment, and the human species is extinct. So therefore we have missions in this area to organize ourselves on planet Earth to the defense of Earth as necessary, and to do other things and dealing with the part of the universe which we inhabit. And that should be, and thermonuclear fusion brings us into that area. And the next thing comes matter, antimatter, which is Einstein's baby. So we have to have a perspective, and we always need a perspective. Where should mankind go next? We have to be what we are inherently, a creative species. Therefore, we have to be looking always to the future, not to the past, but to the future. And in that way, we understand our proper destiny. There's a lot more to this than I've said, but essentially that's the essential point. Mankind will not be able to secure mankind himself unless we now turn with the skills we have and the skills which are accessible for us to develop to be able to muster an adequate defense of planet Earth and its people, and to use the moon as a special instrument for conveniently launching materials from Earth's surface into the moon. Because if you have to pump all that distance and go up to the moon every time you take a trip, it's very wasteful. So what you better do is build an apparatus on the moon, underneath the surface, and where you will build and assemble things which you are going to use for work in space. And that should be the destiny which we work toward now. And to go into space, not to dwell there, but to realize what we have to do there on behalf of planet Earth. And if we take that orientation, thermonuclear fusion gives us the stepping stone toward higher forms of productivity, which can be reached then. What we need then is, again, not a practical program, because there are no practical programs out there. They're all incompetent. What we can do then is, by getting control of these means of improvements, we can create the opportunities for mankind to do the kinds of things that mankind must do in the interests of mankind.